So a couple of disclaimers. First, we have no slides. Secondly, although Caitlin, I think, broke the ice, there's probably going to be some swearing because I know Joe very well, and I'm not sure he can contain himself.
I'll be good.
Hopefully in the video thing you can bleep that out, but that probably will happen.
I also don't know anything about what he's going to ask me, so it's a big setup to make me look foolish again.
Yes. Another disclaimer, Joe and I are very dear friends, although given the names he calls me, you'd never know it. So the last bit is I am not an entrepreneur and I'm not an investor. So it was interesting when Layla contacted me and started talking to me about maybe presenting here. I was excited to come and listen, but there was a real question, so what am I going to talk about? I'm neither of those things. But I have worked for entrepreneurs since I was 12 years old. And with a brief foray at Miller Coors, in the Tenth and Blake division, and 364 days at AB. Other than that, the last 48 years has been working with and around entrepreneurs. And most of them have been successful on some level. A couple of them have been wildly successful. And then a couple of them not so. And so what we talked about was maybe, and I've been trying to figure out what's the secret sauce that makes an entrepreneur successful, wildly successful, or fails. And I've had some wonderful people I've worked around to try to find what that common thread was. And I thought I was doing pretty well until I met Joe. And Joe sort of threw a lot of things out the window. So Mark, wherever you are, had a quote earlier on that said, you have to be idiotic to start a beverage company in this space. So Joe's an idiot times 3.
This is true.
And I can vouch for that.
Stupidity is a very underrated quality to entrepreneurs.
So he started Nutrisoda when the notion of sort of functional beverages was probably got looked at and said, what are you, an idiot? I got to know him through Crispin Cider when he was driving Crispin and trying to essentially invent the entire notion of craft cider. And people looked at him and said, what are you, an idiot? But after a brief time, Pepsi certainly didn't think he was an idiot. Miller Coors certainly didn't think he was an idiot. And now he's driving American brandy in the heart of bourbon country. And so if you're asking yourselves, what is he, an idiot? Maybe. But
I feel like an idiot.
Constellation doesn't think so. Who's taken a minority position in Joe's company. So before I get into asking Joe on how he does this, how he's sort of, he's a bit of a periscope. He does see what's coming around the corner. And he's done it multiple times now, and I think he's got a sort of a way that I think his line is, find the spaces between places. But I think one of the differences that I see in successful entrepreneurs and not is the ones that haven't been successful don't really know their own personal limitations. They think, I've had some success, I can keep doing this, I can scale this company, I can run this company when it's larger, I can do all this stuff better than all the people in my company. And those entrepreneurs that I've worked with that had that mindset either succeeded on a very small scale or didn't. The ones that have been wildly successful are the ones that do know their own limitations. They recognize it, and that recognition is one of their big strengths, and they supplant themselves with great people around them. Joe, once again, breaks the mold. I think Joe, if I would quote him, would say, limitations, fuck limitations. And so from what I've witnessed with Joe, really limitations are things that are great opportunities because other people are going to back down from them, and he just doesn't. So Joe, the other part of this was if I bring Joe, then I can just talk in the beginning, and then he does the next 15 straight minutes.
And we have no video. We're stupid.
Yes, I know.
When in doubt, when in trouble, get video.
Right.
Just show video.
So first one is you were had a really sort of pretty cushy job, successful job with a big multinational company. You're a senior marketing guy living around the world in all sorts of glamorous places, and then you decided to chuck it and become an entrepreneur. So was it a head-on collision, or what exactly made you decide to go that route?
I'd always had dreams of starting companies. Firstly, I'm not sure I can teach any of you anything. When I've stood up, listen in the back corner at all of your successes and great thinking and whatever. So I think if you walk away with this as perhaps some kind of reinforcement of entrepreneurs are stupid, Joe is balding and stupid, and maybe I can give you some insight into just a framework as to how Leslie and I think about entering the market space versus the marketplace. That's probably the best that I can do, and feel free to interrupt me or Jeff at any time. Would be relieved, in truth. And you can ask us any question that you would like. And so when you look at how did we start Nutrisoda, drinking. I like to drink wine, and I was commiserating with my wife at how much I hated my job at Novartis, and she said, "Why don't you start a business? You've always wanted to start a business." And I had no idea about what business to start, and she suggested, "Why don't you do a soda for healthy purposes?" And I'd been running Novartis' medical nutrition business for North America, so nutritional intervention for sick people. I said, shit, I actually know how to do that. I can make functional sodas that actually work, that we could put in more than monkey dust into a soda, that the functional application would work. And fortuitously around that time, Red Bull had come along and brought out a $1.99 can, 8-ounce can, would change the whole margin framework around soda, because suddenly you could actually put your functional ingredients into a soda. But here's the framework. The market space is probably the smartest way to look at starting a business. When we were starting Nutrisoda, a Red Bull knockoff was launched every single day that you could read on BevNet. And we would never do that. And we have much more of a thoughtful approach to how we enter the market space and what's the definition of that market space. Am I digressing?
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So I started a business drinking with my wife, and she told me to do a soda with health benefits, and we started that way. And what we did was develop this idea of what is the next space. So we're graduates of the Wayne Gretzky School of Management. Okay, we skate where the puck is going, not where the puck is. So we would never compete with, say, my friend Alan at Heaven Hill in Bourbon. That's sheer stupidity. He's just going to stomp on me. Okay, we would never do Red Bull because that is another stomping exercise. Or when everybody thought that we were geniuses and we weren't, when we sold Nutrisoda, we went into cider, because where do we add value into this whole space? What is our idea that gives us not only differentiation but also distinction, so that we become a compelling reason to disrupt the market? So looking at, say, American brandy, the way that we looked at it was, well, I've got $15 cheap and sweet California brandy, and I've got $50 cognac, and I have a complete absence of the $35 trade-up ladder brand. And there's almost no consumer category that exists that doesn't have the ladder price between value and premium. And so we drove a bus on a price point value term through the $35 price point, which got us at a price point in terms of wholesale that we could get onto cocktail menus and those things. The second thing that didn't exist was, there was no such thing as American brandy. 4 years ago, no one ever spoke about American brandy. Suddenly, American brandy is hot. And when the illustration about what we do is we identify the space, and then through sheer pace and ferocity, we attack that space and make it a platform and make it real and get people talking about it. And it is really about that platform. And, the legendary Maya Khan, ex-chairman of SAB Miller, has the gift of aphorism, and I'm just stealing his, but business is like a wheelbarrow. You pick it up to move it. And that's what we do. But we pick it up and we run like fucking hell and attack. That's what we do. That's all that we do in a very creative way. that's different.
And I can vouch for that. So that sort of leads to what I think that partially answers what I'm going to ask you, which is, so Nutrisoda, you picked up the wheelbarrow and you drove it, and you essentially created a space, or filled a space that you identified successfully, pretty high growth rate, sold it to Pepsi. I don't know, it lasted a couple of years, and then they
18 months.
They did 18 months. Crispin,
Thank the Lord.
where I got to know Joe, Crispin was an absolute juggernaut. And the cider space, which is now fairly mature and actually quite large at the time, had failed several times in the U.S. There was no market for cider in the U.S. And then Crispin came along and lifted up the wheelbarrow and drove it. And my job at Miller Coors at 10th and Blake, one of them was trying to find sort of the Worthmore products, as they'd like to call them, and do some small-scale M&A and bring on brands that will be future hot brands. And Crispin fit the bill perfectly. And we were all very excited to bring on Crispin. Miller Coors brought in Crispin. And I don't know, how many people here have tried Crispin? That's pretty good.
Oh, God bless you.
But I would say that Crispin's growth rate and virtually Crispin's prospects dramatically diminished after Miller Coors got their hands on it. So why?
I think what happens is, so a lot of the brands that you're hearing about here are built on this framework of quite collected thinking, with like an energy that vortex that surrounds it around that original thought, and that there's this innovation profile that you saturate the conversation. So no one was speaking about cider when we started. It was about 0.16% of the beer market. It was just tiny, really, really, really tiny little category, no innovation. And so what happens when an entrepreneur looks at a big category and a big dormant category, we go and say, there's so much we can do here. And we go in and, you start with your core, and then you have another idea that builds around the core and creates these soldiers that surround the core, and they march forward together, and the innovation performs this halo marketing because everybody kind of thinks that the brand is cool. So with cider, what we would do is we focused on talking to men. Okay, the strategy really revolved on American cider from fresh pressed juice, with a very large permission for men to drink cider again. Because in the U.S., cider was this chick drink and gave you heartburn. I would literally ask people what, and they say, "Oh, my girlfriend likes it," and they'd be rubbing their chests about why they didn't drink cider. And so we just spoke to men, and then we spoke to craft beer drinkers, because that was the most fertile territory for a cider to operate. These were people that were looking along flavor spectrum in terms of what I like to drink, and we did the first hazies. So now Hazy IPA is a huge thing. We did unfiltered cider. We should have called them hazy ciders. It would have been cooler. And suddenly craft beer drinkers like that. And then we had draft, themed on Marvin Gaye, in terms of black chocolate and cherries. And then we did, the Four Musketeers, which you had to get from 4 different bars during beer week. So we just flagging all of this innovation constantly. And the innovation, to some, looks like fragmentation. What it is actually your TV ad. It's your media ad. It's your permission to believe, to have a conversation. And when you get into a big company, suddenly, we as a cider company had been solving specific needs in a cider category, from English cider to, let's call it craft beer cider in 22-ounce bombers, to core cider on draft over ice. We had those 3 things, and Miller Coors said, well, what's the one? And we said, there's not one. There's, I don't know, fucking 25 at that stage. I don't know. There was a lot. And then so they focus on the one. And so that conversation starts to die down. The embers of the fire start to go dormant. and nobody's really talking about cider again. And then you've got to navigate the bureaucracy of going into the chain account, and the Miller Coors chain account guy says, how much money have you got? This is my guy. All right? And I'm saying, I have no money. Let me go and talk to the chain guy. Oh, no, you can't talk to the chain guy. So I would talk to the chain guy around the Miller Coors guy. And they said, shit, yeah, you're on. Come on in. And we would get into Kroger and whatever. But the whole conversation within big companies is, how much money do you have? Where are you going to get it? What are you going to do? Whereas the whole conversation around entrepreneurs is really, the consumer will really like this. And maybe they won't, but I'm sure that if they give it a go, they might. And so you just go. And big companies lose that velocity of invention because they're so focused on the bureaucracy of getting stuff through and manage it. I called Miller Coors, the M&C stood for meetings and conference calls. I eventually bailed on the whole thing. I said, well, I can't do that one. So I think that's why they fail.
We'll edit that part out.
I think they fail because they become hidebound and they don't understand that the consumer is really looking for invention. So when you look at Zach's stuff, some shit won't work, but a lot of what won't work says the stuff that does work is cool and worthy. But that experimentation is a value system that drives the heart of what the consumer is looking. The consumer is far more adventurous than most of the suppliers. And this is a challenge that Walmart face right now when they're looking at their customers. Their customers are looking for better beer, better wine, better booze, better whatever. You have to factor into the most adventurous palate era in American history right now. And that's what's happening. So I don't think that the very big companies are understanding that you have to create this momentum around a bigger concept, and that it's much more effective to bring innovation or the drugstore or Katie's Sufferfest kind of stuff, which is beautiful. I wish I thought of it. Shit, it's great, and it's like that kind of authentic touch point of a product or a moment or whatever. Big companies don't do that because they got MBAs, and MBAs want to do the management side of everything versus the execution side of everything. And little companies execute like crazy animals.
So that last line was how I would parse all that down is execution animal is what all of the companies that I've seen Joe part of, that's sort of their hallmark. When we bought Crispin, so it was Joe and I sort of bonded over this idea, and the idea was Miller Coors is going to be able to put muscles on the mouse.
Yep.
And that was this awesome idea. All these things that the scale of this large company could bring, and we're going to give the mouse access to it. And so we had this little picture of Mighty Mouse with Joe's head on it. Yep. But what in fact happened was not that. It became kind of muscle bound. And so, what I can say is the guy who's not the elephant, not the entrepreneur, but the guy who cleans up behind the elephant all the time. If you start looking at going in and partnering with a large company, it's a very attractive notion of muscles on the mouse. But you got to be really, really careful and really, really clear about where decision rights and governance rights are, because, as Joe said, the natural inclination will be to make it muscle bound. One of those things they're going to offer you help on is legal. And as soon as that happens, then you can say goodnight. So we have 17 seconds left. Any questions for Joe?
There is one thing that I would leave everyone with. I'm not sure how many of you have read the book Blue Ocean Strategy. If you haven't, that's the Bible for us. And so we work off a matrix, the Blue Ocean matrix of create, amplify, reduce, and eliminate. And that's all we do. And I take my sales team through our Blue Ocean strategy. Everyone that comes in goes through that. And in 5 years, we've never changed it. Okay? We stick on the strategy and we do that. So I'd really, if there's a thoughtful process of do your Blue Ocean matrix, define your space, really define it very clearly where you operate in Blue Ocean versus in the red ocean of giant companies, you'll have much more chances of success. And I think that would probably be the biggest lesson that I could leave you. Who likes
Get the hook.
Premier League football, soccer? Okay, so we're all Leicester City, okay? We're all going. We don't have any defense, but we attack like mindless wolves. Okay, that's the only way to win. Be Leicester City, pace, pressure, and you're going to win.
Be Leicester City. There you go.
There
There's
you
your
go.
takeaway.